So let's see. Assuming all the players finalize their contracts with the Lakers, they'll have a combined 60 All-Star appearances throughout their entire roster. The Nets will have 44. That's over 100 total All-Star selections between just these two teams. Like 5 years ago, if you were to show people these rosters, they would think you're joking. It's like you have two All-Star teams going at it. Granted, currently many of the players are aging and haven't been All-Star caliber players for a few years, but just the concept of so many free agents, especially highly desired ones, are joining either the Lakers or Nets. This is unprecedented. And the thing is, both of these super teams came out of nowhere. It's like you had LeBron join the Lakers and KD join the Nets. Then everyone else followed, because those two superstars had such a huge pull on the rest of the league. Perhaps the biggest surprise is how differently these teams look compared to just a few years ago. They both went from being a young, rebuilding team to having stacked rosters filled with older, aging stars. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and in this video, let's take a look at how quickly the Lakers and Nets have changed. What encouraged them to go in this direction? Will they regret it in the near future? Is this good for the NBA as a whole? Let's take a look at the entire timeline. Also, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe. If you like the content, drop a sub or a like, and thank you so much for the support. It's the summer of 2019. The Brooklyn Nets have been the laughingstock for so many years, after getting robbed by the Celtics in that ludicrous trade. They had no picks for such a long time, and their, quote, super team flamed out a year after the trade was made. But slowly, they rebuilt. In 3 short years, the Nets developed a respectable young roster and surprisingly returned to the playoffs. Led by D'Angelo Russell, Spencer Dinwiddie, Caris LeVert, and Jarrett Allen, this was a young team worth cheering for. None of those players are on the team anymore. On June 30th, an injured Kevin Durant announced his decision to join the Brooklyn Nets, and this move by itself changed the course of the franchise. Oh, the Nets brass certainly knew. It was time to give up their rebuild and go all in on Durant. Everyone knew he wasn't coming alone. A player of his caliber wanted to win. Almost immediately, Kyrie and DeAndre Jordan would join him. But because of Durant's injury, the Nets needed to be patient. On the other side of the country, the Lakers were also in a similar situation. LeBron joined the team in the previous year, but the 2018-19 season was underwhelming. It turns out, surrounding LeBron with a bunch of young, inexperienced guys did not work out. And for the 6th season in a row, the Lakers missed the playoffs, their longest playoff drought in franchise history. He was biding his time, waiting for the chance to grab another superstar, and it happened. In late 2019, Anthony Davis, with the help of Rich Paul and Clutch Sports, refused to play until his trade to LA was granted. It ended up being very good for both organizations, as the Pelicans now had so many assets and the Lakers got the star they needed. And just like the Nets, the rebuild was over. It was time to go all in and contend for the title. This is the difference between these two teams and the rest of the NBA. While most other teams would continue to rebuild and gather young prospects, the Lakers and Nets immediately flipped all their assets when they saw the opportunity to win the championship. Historically, this actually does not work out well. On the back of my mind, I can think of a few situations where going all in does not work. The Celtics-Nets trade I mentioned earlier was one of them. Another one was when Carmelo Anthony joined the Knicks, and they had to give up so much to get him. Or even the Russell Westbrook for Chris Paul trade, where the Rockets gave up 2 first-rounders and 2 pick swaps for just 1 season of Westbrook. However, this time, it's different. Both the Nets and Lakers confidently went all in, giving up most of their assets because they knew that LeBron and Durant were not regular superstars. They're both generational talents, but most importantly, they had a lot of friends across the league. So wherever they go, other players will follow. Fast forward to 2020, and this is where the recruitment process really ramped up. James Harden, disgruntled in Houston, employed the Anthony Davis tactic and forced himself to Brooklyn. They immediately became the team to beat in the East. And if it wasn't for the injuries, they certainly were going to the finals. After seeing the Lakers win the title, Harden knew him and the Nets could do the same thing. And all of this started just because one guy, Kevin Durant, wanted to go to Brooklyn. It came at a huge cost. Critics compared this Harden trade to the old horrendous trade back in 2013, the one involving Pierce, KG, and Terry. The Nets gave an astronomical package for Harden, 3 first-rounders plus 4 first-round pick swaps, and their young prospects who made drastic improvements, Jarrett Allen and Karis LeVert. This leads us to the next question: will they regret it? Will they regret giving up all their assets and future picks again, just to have a short window to contend? A trade like this does not come without risks. People in the media, the writers, the journalists, they're hesitant. An article from 538 put it nicely. It can be a slow process for 3 players of this caliber to learn how to play off one another, given how much they're all used to having the ball in their hands. Sometimes players have the same sweet spots on the court. But there's a case to be made that with this much elite offensive talent, none of that matters. By adding Harden, the Nets have now assembled the 2nd, 7th, and 8th best offensive players in the league since 2015, according to our Raptor metric. Fortunately, the difference is KD, Harden, and Kyrie are still near the top of their games, while the old super team was not. For the Nets organization, I do think there's a lot of pressure to perform, and they gotta stay healthy. They just gave up their entire future again, so if they don't win a championship with this squad, this experiment will be a huge failure. As for the Lakers, they've already won the championship after blowing up their young squad, so everything they gave up to get Davis and the others, it was worth it. Even if LeBron retires and the Lakers go back to mediocrity, they've already achieved their goal. Now, let's take a look at the key free agent signings both these teams made in the 2021 offseason. Starting with Paul Millsap, a highly desired free agent who signed with the Nets. Reportedly, over half the league was interested in him and willing to offer him way more money than the Nets did, but he still went to Brooklyn. Patty Mills, who just had a great Olympic run, signed with the Nets too. LaMarcus Aldridge signed with them on a minimum, although he was already there before his heart problems. Even so, he'd still fetch a lot more than the minimum on most other teams. A few months prior to the offseason, they got Blake Griffin for the minimum after getting bought out by the Pistons. He wasn't as good as before, but I mean, come on, the minimum for Blake Griffin? No other team could have pulled that off. DeAndre Jordan left the Nets to sign with the Lakers, another highly desired center, but other teams knew they had no chance. It's demoralizing. Then you had other notable free agents like Kendrick Nunn sign with the Lakers on a measly 2-year $10 million deal. For a young guy putting up his numbers, he should have gotten a lot more. CJ McCollum even came out and accused the Lakers of manipulating him. Malik Monk signed for a 1-year minimum deal, a 23-year-old player who just had a great season. And he took a pay cut to join the Lakers? Seriously? Then of course, you had the Russell Westbrook trade, which was a pretty good deal actually. Then they got Melo as well, who just had a respectable year in Portland, but also signed for the minimum. And the year before, Marc Gasol signed for 2 years $5 million, also severely under his market value. That's a huge number of quality free agents going to 2 teams for well below their market value. It's like the snowball effect. Good players who want to win continue stacking on the teams with the best chances. This brings us to the final question: is this good for the NBA? By having 2 superstars basically build their own super teams from scratch? Well, studies have shown in the past that super teams cause NBA ratings to skyrocket. The Miami Heat, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Golden State Warriors, they drew some of the highest viewerships of their era. While less prominent teams, like, for example, the 2021 finals, the ratings severely tanked. So, from a revenue standpoint, it's great for the league. The story of the season revolves around the Lakers and Nets, and that generates way more interest than some small market teams excelling. It does suck for every other team. to have two teams that are above and beyond anyone else in superstar talent, but also have the lure and draw of being in a big market, to attract players who are willingly taking pay cuts to join them. There's also the issue of tampering, which, I made a whole video about that. It's against the rules for any player or executive to recruit somebody else if they're under contract. But we all know nobody follows them. Players talk to each other all the time, casually. It's impossible to stop that. Anyway, that's all folks. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section about the Lakers and Nets. Do you like how they rebuilt their teams? Do you think they'll regret their choices, especially the Nets, if they don't win a title? Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.